I'm going to hit the record button now. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt us or put it in the chat box. We're certainly open to that and open to any discussion, even if it seems off topic or not. We're certainly open to that now or afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, let me find it here. So it's interesting, when we first did the first webinar, it was last week, and it was right as Governor Reynolds had laid out the back to school, some additional guidelines and protocols for our school. And so a lot of what we're sharing gives us a little bit more context, although we know that all of the schools certainly have a little bit different nuances throughout the state and even within our catchment areas. So everything's going to be a little different. So we're going to talk a little bit in general terms, but we know that there certainly are some standards that all of our schools are going to follow. So these are some things that we're going to cover. What our kids have been experiencing throughout this pandemic, how kids may respond in school, how to help them transition back to school, helping them with masks, kids' fears of catching COVID, how then we as parents can manage our own anxiety, and then definitely time for questions at the end and throughout, as I said. Okay, not a good start that already. Oh, here we go. Okay, so to start with, what kids have been experiencing. Grief and loss has certainly been a big one. And what it looks like for kids is similar to what it's looked like for us. So the loss of normalcy, I think, is one of the biggest things. Normal routines, not getting to spend time with friends, not seeing family members, summer vacations, not getting to finish out school years or big events maybe they had, sports. And for kids, you know, the way they grieve or the way they experience those things, depending on their age, they're often not able to articulate it. So it might come out in different ways. They might not share it, but they're experiencing those same sort of losses that we have had in our lives, which really comes to that loss of control, which we have all experiencing. We don't know what's happening, not even month to month or week to week, but day to day. Everything keeps changing and we have no control over it. The information keeps changing and the people we look to for answers don't have them. Kids are looking to us, and because we're the people they trust and we don't have the answers. They have even less control over that situation, and that really creates a lot of anxiety, stress, and fear because they don't know how to make that better. Stress in that can be for big reasons. Maybe a parent has lost a job. Maybe there have been sick family members. There might have been a death in the family. It might have been just the stress of families experiencing
Pode ser tipo luto, mas é mais uma coisa assim, tipo, tá, como é que fala?
I am going to ask if you're not,
assim, é uma tristeza, uma coisa mais longa.
if everybody could maybe put their phones or your videos on mute, that would be helpful just to help with background noises if you haven't already. That would be great. Thank you. I don't know if any of you have experienced, we certainly did in my home, just the stress of being together all of the time. I have married and I have a 12-year-old daughter, and we weren't used to being together all the time, just the three of us. It created a lot of stress, new adjustments. Kids feel that, experience that. For some kids, it's been food insecurity or changes in what that looks like. And kids who have underlying mental health issues, worsening of that. Some of it could be not having access to mental health or just an increase in that anxiety or depression. Give the slide a second if you would. Oh, come on.
When our slides are slow to change, that might be a good time for people to ask questions if they have to.
Yes, yeah, that's a great suggestion, Emily. So what kids may display at school? So these are some of the things that you may see from your kids. And these aren't necessarily kids, these are normal kids, so to speak, whatever normal kids are, but any child may experience just based on experiences that they've had with COVID and the pandemic. What we, just a reminder again, if you could mute your phone lines, that would be helpful. But 5 to 10% of the general population, adults and children, will develop PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. That comes from data and research on any sort of natural disaster. It happened after the last pandemic. So that, think about that in terms of a classroom, 5 to 10% of any classroom. But those are kids who will develop PTSD. And when you think about trauma, sometimes we think about a car accident or abuse or those big things. What's going on right now is a big thing in a child's life. And so there's things that you want to pay attention to that might go unresolved, that you would want to be on alert for to see if that child may need intervention, as well as us as adults, which we'll talk about in a little while. You may see kids become frustrated more easily, feeling anxious and overwhelmed, whereas maybe last year your child could handle schoolwork just fine, would come home at night and talk about their day. You may hear them talking about feeling really overwhelmed with really basic tasks or things they handled very well. And a lot of it, and we'll be talking about, is there's so much change that they're going to be experiencing, and that is what's creating some of those feelings that they don't know how to manage. And so all of these kind of behaviors that I'm describing are what happens with kids. They kind of come out sideways. And that's what I'm really describing, because kids aren't necessarily able to verbalize, I'm feeling overwhelmed because of all of these changes due to COVID, Mom. So what happens is these behaviors come out, and that's what we're really describing right here. You might notice they're really restless or on high alert. And we all have in us this fight or flight when we get really scared. And so some of that is that really kind of what's going to happen next, and what do I need to be on alert for, because things keep changing so rapidly in their world. When you, if you have paid attention to any of the guidelines that Governor Reynolds in Iowa put out, she talked about, you know, if a school ends up transitioning to a hybrid model or transitioning to full remote learning, it's only for a period of 14 days. So when you think about our kids, and I'm not talking one way or another about whether that's good or bad, what I'm saying is from a child's perspective, that could be a lot of transitioning back and forth. And so thinking about, again, that high alert, when are things going to change? Yesterday I was in school, everything's fine. Is it going to be tomorrow that now we're going to be home and remote learning? And why was that? And what happened? And was it my friend that caused this? So those are all things that create those internal feelings that kids are experiencing and aren't able to verbalize always. Being really teary or sad and not really sure why. I don't know about any of you as adults, but I've had times of that throughout this, just that feeling of overwhelmingness and not always knowing how to express that. Feeling fatigue or losing interest in things that typically they would enjoy. Things that they like to have fun with their siblings or play games or sports, and just not really enjoying them as much as they used to. And then preoccupation. So that means when they should be paying attention in class or they should be focused on things, they're thinking about other things, or they might be thinking about what's going to happen next, and so they can't really focus on what's in front of them. All right. I think I figured out a new way to maybe move the slides better. I'm going to try this. Yes. All right. So now that I've shared all of that with you, we're going to talk about what you can do as a parent. Emily?
Yeah. So these things, of course, have all been relevant throughout our kind of COVID quarantine time ever since March or April or wherever, as well as most of these things are just relevant all the time anyway. What we as parents can do to help our kids with their emotions, but especially looking at this weird transition time and these unknowns about the school year. One thing that's really important as we adults try to understand where our kids are at and help them with their emotions and transitions is listening. I think that's something that's challenging for us as adults to do with kids all the time, because they might kind of blabber on, or they don't know how to express what they are feeling. They don't know how to identify what they're feeling sometimes. The feeling chart you see there, those kinds of things can be helpful ways of giving them language for what they're experiencing. And when we listen, what I mean is like draw things out of them by asking questions. Don't assume that you know what they're feeling. Like you might be anxious as a parent about this school stuff because you know more, you've been looking into it more, you've been thinking about it for longer, you know, trying to plan ahead. Your child might not be. I mean, they could very well be anxious, but they might not be. They might not be as anxious as you think they are. They might be more anxious than you think. Anyway, the point is don't assume where they are. Ask and find out. They could have different influences on them, or they could have a very carefree attitude and not be anxious about it. So to understand what they know already, and to ask open-ended questions, not just something that can be answered in a yes or a no or an I don't know. And like I said, give them a vocabulary for it. And then when they're able to state how they feel about it, it's really important to let them know that their feelings are okay. And there's nothing wrong with being scared or angry or nervous or carefree or whatever it is that they feel. That's called validating their feelings. Like, you have the right to feel that. It's your feeling. That's fine. You can feel that way. And normalize their feelings. And that means letting them know that they're not the only one feeling that way. If you happen to relate to them, share that with them. Sometimes I feel that way too, honey. Or even if you don't, lots of people are feeling that way. I understand that many, many people are feeling nervous, or, the whole world is confused with all that's going on.
All the kids are swimming with my neighbors.
Giving age-appropriate facts to reassure them and correct any potential misinformation that they have. And we know there's a lot of that around. There's can be misunderstandings, and so we want to give them facts, but that are age-appropriate. So your child's personality too may determine what's appropriate to share with them and share or not share with them. So about some of our sources of information, we get we read articles and watch news programs and listen to radio and stuff like that. And some of those things, especially images on TV, might not be appropriate for young kids. I'm recalling some of the earlier footage in like March and April from New York City. Was very disturbing images of, they didn't have room in the hearses and things like that. It could have been very, especially disturbing to children, and they don't have a context kind of to understand this whole big thing. And children tend to fill in, if there's gaps in their information, they tend to fill that in with their imagination. So they can be prone to thinking the worst or making up something that they that's relevant to a cartoon or a show that they saw, you know, like science fiction or something. Older kids, we can certainly talk with older kids about the information they're exposed to and have more in-depth conversation with them. And young kids, of course, we should be conversing with them too, but just being mindful of their age and what's appropriate to share with them. One of the ways that can be helpful as we cope, all of us, with this loss of control in certain areas in our lives is thinking about, where am I attributing the control in my life? Like there's two different pictures here. One happy stick person knows that they have some control in their life. They're focusing on the things that they do have control of. They feel empowered because they're thinking about things in terms of, I can educate my family. I can, you know, we can rely on our spiritual beliefs for comfort. We can wear masks. We're happy to wear masks, or whatever, you know, whatever you feel like your part is in this, in protecting your family and protecting your community and your neighbors and your classmates and things like that. And the other side of the picture is a person who feels like the control in their life, locus of control just means location. So they feel like the control in their life is outside of them. The authorities have control, like the school, the governor, the other people. Things happen to me instead of I make things happen. It can be a very depressing way to think about things. In reality, you know, there are things in everybody's life that we do have control over, and there are things in everybody's life that we don't have control over. But focusing on the things that we do have control over has a very empowering and positive effect in our lives, as opposed to the depressive attitude of things happen to me and I don't have any control. So on that note, one of the precautions that we can take as we help prepare our kids for going back to school is helping them focus on what they are in control of. And we can talk about, like, if masks are required in your school, you can talk about that as, this is what we're doing to help. We're doing our part. We're covering our faces, you know, everybody else is covering their faces for us. We're covering ours. We're being respectful of the school's rules. We're making sure that society flows smoothly and we're still getting school in. This is what we're doing to contribute and help. And it feels good to focus on what you are in control of and kind of own that. And it feels good to help others. And we can also explain the reasons why we are using these precautions and having these new expectations. You know, you can refer to your child's science book. There are things in there that would match up about, you know, or health book maybe with, you know, covering your coughs and things like that and sneezes. Why it's good to wash hands. I mean, for years and years, kids have been doing little glitter experiments at school, right? Where they touch glitter and then they realize, oh, you can't get it off until you wash and scrub with soap and water. And oh, look, then the germs are gone. It's a little glitter experiment. So they've been taught these things, and these things may make sense to them as we remind them from their science book or their health book. Like, these are things to prevent, you know, the spread of colds and flus and other viruses. Let's see, so there are a few other things that schools may be doing that they haven't done before. Like, they've always encouraged hand washing, of course, now more than ever. But we can talk with them about the temperatures before, you know, that if they may be expected to have their temperature taken before school, or not switch classrooms and eat their lunch in their classroom even. We can frame it positively. You know, this is a short time period. We're just doing a little in-classroom adventure where we're pretending we're living in a pod, you know. There are positive spins you can put on it, and you can help your child think about it and reframe it into a positive kind of way. And you can tell them this isn't going to last forever. Next school year will be different. there will be solutions that are found for these things. We're just, in the meantime, doing things a little differently. One last point that I feel like is important to make is there are so many different and strong opinions in our culture right now, which there are generally about a lot of things, but right now it seems to be quite heightened. There are ways that kids can feel stuck in the middle of that too. It could be, you know, mom and dad think this way, aunt and uncle think that way, or grandma and grandpa feel like this is wrong and that's right, and it's different than our family thinks, or whatever. And we add, when we go back to school, the school has some rules that parents might not agree with. And just like, you know, many divorced families have learned that when one household believes one thing or thinks or has rules or expectations in one direction, and the other household is very different, even opposite, that can be hard on kids, and they can feel the tension of the disagreement between the adults. In this case also, if they have to go to school and obey their teachers and respect their administrators and things like that, that may be hard if parents are talking bad about the school at home and the decisions that the school has made. So I just want parents to be aware of what kind of position that puts the kid in. It makes them feel stuck in the middle. And it's really important for them to be able to go to school and respect their staff members and teachers there, because that's where they need to learn. Okay, let's see. Is this one mine too, Amy, right? Yeah.
He's like, yep, keep going.
Yeah.
Okay.
So masks are one of the more unusual things that we're doing that kids are probably not going to be used to, but kids are quite adaptable, more so than some adults, I think. But it can be especially hard for kids because, especially younger kids, they are learning social cues from facial expressions. And then when they're out in the public now and in schools now with faces covered or halfway covered, it can be hard for them to understand how they need to react to people. Are you smiling under there? Are you frowning under there? I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to respond to you. Are you mad at me? Or are you, whatever. And they do actually have some masks with a clear part right there, so you can see a smile if a person is smiling. That may be a solution for some schools or some families. But we can help our kids get comfortable with wearing whatever kind of mask is available for them to be wearing and for adults around them to be wearing. If we use simple words to explain why people are wearing masks, of course, the younger, the simpler we want to explain it. Like I said, you can refer to facts that have been taught to kids for years about viruses and germs. Give them time to get used to it. Start wearing the masks, maybe as part of play at home, but just, like practice or when going out to stores and things like that, especially. Give them time to get used to it and listen to their feelings about it and reassure them that, it's just for a little while, it'll be all right. Answer their questions about it, give them support, wear masks with them. That will help them feel like they don't stick out like a sore thumb or something like that. The more other people around them are doing it, the more they're going to adjust to it as well. And there are some kids who might have extra difficulties wearing masks if they have some special needs such as autism or sensory problems. Some of the same things can work, but there are some extra things that may be helpful too. Making it fun can work for all kids, and modeling can work for all kids. Just educating them about it to whatever level they're able to understand. We can give incentives and prizes and treats for great job, you wore your mask for 20 minutes longer today than you were able to wear it yesterday. Things like that. Amy, are there other things on there that you want to explain for the like pairing and that?
Yeah, so one of the things that can be really helpful for kids who might be on the autism spectrum, the concept of pairing would be to have them have the mask on and pairing it with another physical sensation that they experience that they like. So maybe it's hugging or tickling or something that they can associate or pair with another positive physical sensation. And so doing that for short periods of time, so they're associating it, and doing that for short periods of time can be a very positive, it becomes a positive experience for them. And that's one concept that is especially helpful with kids with autism, with sensory issues. I think the incentivized piece can be especially helpful for kids as well with maybe some behavioral issues. I think who might say, well, I'm not going to do this because I don't have to. What are some, different things you can put in place, maybe some behavioral charts, different things, reward systems. Those are some of the things when we talk about incentivize that I think can be especially helpful in those specific places. I think for the most part, what I've been reading about different back to school plans is it's going to be in the places where people can't social distance, and there's going to be those places for almost all kids. So most kids are going to have that period of time. So as much as we can do, I think with that, and find a way for your child, what is that going to be? For some kids, they're going to need that extra piece to be able to be successful. All right. So one of the things, that I think is important to think about is, and has to do with children's fear of getting COVID. I think the first step in that is looking at our own anxiety around that, because kids follow our example. They pick up on if we're feeling anxious about that. And oftentimes we tend to not, or think that our children aren't really paying attention to that they're, they're over there playing and they're not really maybe paying attention to the conversation I'm having over here, or my stress level about that, or things like that. And what we have to do as parents first is examine what are the fears that I have? Are they rational, or are they factual? So for all of us to have a little bit of fear around it, that's probably a rational fear, because there's the possibility that if we leave our house and are around people, that's a potential fear. Now, for me, as a fairly healthy 48-year-old person who goes out and wears my mask and washes my hands, I'm doing a lot of things to control as much as I can that. So it's really looking at all of those pieces. So first I have to look at myself, and Darla's going to help us with that in a little bit. Something that's really important to do, and we as parents sometimes, because our instinct is to protect our kids, we don't always do, is to have the conversation with your child about how are they feeling about COVID. Emily talked about, sometimes we think we might know based on whatever comments they might have made or comments they haven't made. So we think, oh, they're not really thinking about it. They're not worried about it. So we think we're just going to let sleeping dogs lie. And we just want to protect them. We also might be worried we're going to put the thought in their head if I have the conversation with them. And so now they weren't afraid, but now all of a sudden they're going to be afraid if I have the conversation with them. No. They're already having their own thoughts about them, which oftentimes are much worse than reality, similar to us. They're no different than that. And it's really important that we're honest with them about that, to learn what our kids already know, to do those skills that Emily talked to us about. Tell me how you're feeling about this. Tell me what you know about it. And this is for all ages, okay? Whether it's a younger child or a teen, which you'll get many differing answers because their knowledge level, their ability to think rationally will be very different based on that. When I talk about being honest, if your child says, could I die from COVID? Or if I get this, am I going to die? Our instinct is to say, there's no way, you're never going to die from that. Or could you die if you get this? No, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to die. Okay, that's what I certainly want to say to my 12-year-old. She's asked me that. So that's our instinct. Now, we don't want to scare them at the same time. So we need to think about their age and be age appropriate with that to say, you know, if I'm talking to a 7-year-old, okay, what I would say is, you know, if we wash our hands and if we're wearing our masks when we can, or when we need to, and we do, and what the doctors tell us is it's a very, very low chance that you're going to get it. Or if you would get it, you're probably going to have the sniffles, and we take really good care of you and get you medicine, just like you got the cold. Okay? So it's being honest with them, as much as maybe sometimes that goes against our instinct to protect them. But before you do that, listen to them, ask those questions. Try not to minimize their fear and be like, oh, that's silly. Don't be afraid of that. Again, that's our attempt to fix, because we're parents, we want to fix that. Again, I understand why you'd be afraid. That's okay. I feel that way sometimes too. What they really need for us to do is understand, validate, and support where they're at, making sure they have that fact-based information and let them know what they can do to control, have as much control as they can. Having that daily routine, and why you hear that so often from people and why that's so important is structure to kids equals safety. Having it's predictable, it's consistent, and that feels safe. That's the one thing they don't have to wonder what's going to happen. I know every day when I get up, I'm going to have Cheerios for breakfast with mom, and my little brother's going to bug me, and then this is what we're going to do, and this is how my day's going to go. If this is the one thing I can predict, I feel safe. That is why it is so important for kids to have that in their lives. And you can do that for them as a parent when the whole rest of the world isn't that way. And then in moving forward, some things to just be aware of with that is watching your child's stress level. So if they start having difficulties with sleep, headaches, stomach aches, these are especially with younger kids, even moving a little bit older, because again, they're not always able to articulate what they're feeling. So you often see it in physical signs and symptoms. And with a little bit older kids and younger again, but maybe more quick to anger at things, get frustrated really easy, or they might tend to withdraw or isolate from others. If you start to see those things, again, once or twice, all kids, you know, it's hard to tell, especially when they get to be teenagers, because some of that's normal development. If you start seeing patterns of concern, that may be where you want to talk to your child, or maybe reach out to ask some questions, you know, maybe from a therapist, or see if they need some help. All right. All right. Is it Darla?
I think it's my turn.
Help
Yeah,
us to manage our anxiety so we don't mess up our kids too bad, or at least me.
That's
anyway.
right. Yeah. Well, thank you guys, both Amy and Emily. This is why I love working at Catholic Charities. I have got great coworkers and colleagues, you know. Anyway, managing your own anxiety, just like Emily and Amy said about, you know, the best thing you can do for your kids is to take care of yourself, right? And that's not an easy job in these days of COVID, and a lot to worry about, and a lot of collective anxiety going on as well. Not just our own, but I think everybody's kind of feeling it together. So it's important to take care of ourselves, because kids do follow our lead, and you know, they do talk about that in airplanes, where you have to put your own air mask on before you put your child's on. The instinct is to put our child's on first and our own second, but it's not a wise thing to do. But when there's a lot of anxiety and when fear kicks in, you know, it's really hard to think straight. It's really hard to be able to kind of manage your mind instead of your mind managing you. You know, our mind can go to the worst case scenarios. It's just kind of a default, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, or what if my child dies? What if, you know, it's just the worst case scenario. We'll be talking about how those looping thoughts, worry thoughts can interfere with just being able to think. You know, Amy was talking about the fight or flight mechanism that kicks in all of us, kids and adults. When anxiety is high, it actually literally kicks you kind of offline so that you can't make decisions or you can't think very clearly. And, you know, so in order to, you know, mitigate all of this or try to get your mind back online, you have to learn some ways to manage it, some different ways to cope. You know, being able to calm down and breathe, and you know, kind of get your bearings back. You know, the biggest thing to know that this is very normal. I mean, it's, you know, it's a normal action, you know, it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. COVID doesn't happen, you know, in lifetimes, you know, sometimes, like, you know, like this is just very unique situation. And everybody is reacting, you know, this is kind of what our brains are meant to do, is to alert us that there's danger around and that we need to pay attention. And, you know, so actually the anxiety isn't a bad thing. It's just what we do with it and how we manage it. That really makes a big difference. And our kids are gonna feel that. They're gonna take your lead, and they see you being able to calm down, breathe through, talk yourself through some, you know, panic attacks. It doesn't have to be that strong, but sometimes it can feel like it lately. There are some really good, easy, quick strategies, and I'm just going to talk about a few of them. There's plenty of things out there. There's very good apps that you can get online, information out there from WebMD. There is some really good information. Just make sure you're on some credible apps and you kind of know, you know, that you're getting some good expert advice from professionals. So just be kind of mindful of that. But one strategy is mindfulness. And it really is a big buzzword in the mental health community. For the last 10 years or so, it's really been taught a lot, but it's really a very simple practice of just being able to pay attention to the moment, you know, to pause and like, okay, what am I feeling? Where, you know, what does my stomach feel right? Or like, where am I feeling the anxiety in my body? It's, you know, the goal is not to ignore the images or the thoughts creating the anxiety. You know, instead you want to be able to pause and kind of go into it. That doesn't seem like a very natural thing to do. The natural thing to do is to run away. But actually, by being mindful and being able to go into your feelings and name them and express them and describe them, helps mitigate it, helps, you know, kind of minimize them, dissolve them, helps you manage them. So mindfulness is, and as there's lots of different practices out there of mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness can be just as paying attention to the fact that your feet are on the ground, that you're sitting on a chair, that you can name 5 things in your room right now that have different textures. You can help kids do this as well. You could make it a fun game. It just helps ground you. It helps bring you to the present moment.
Right.
It helps you realize that in this moment, the worst case scenario is not happening. You know, right now, as I know, I do not have COVID. I am, you know, I don't have a temperature. I'm breathing good. You know, right now, I feel fairly safe. And There's nothing bad happening. So that can kind of release some of your worries and anxieties in the present moment and kind of calm your nervous system down, you know, be able to take some deep breaths, you know, even practice that with your children. Use all of your senses. That's kind of the way the nervous system calms down, is like, what are some good things that you would smell that would make you calm and feel safe? What are some things that you see that would make you feel safe? What would you hear? You know, touching a cuddly blanket or something like that. So using all of your senses to kind of help. There is one mindfulness practice called RAIN, and Amy's going to get to that next. In mental health, another thing we do is use the alphabet a lot, and we name things so we can remember them. And RAIN is a mindfulness meditation practice. You can teach this to your kids and to yourself as well. Is, you know, just to recognize, where am I feeling the anxiety? You know, first of all, just recognizing I do have anxiety. Wow, I really am feeling, you know, pretty anxious lately and really afraid. And, you know, just recognize it, be able to, you know, be mindful enough to know that what you're thinking and how you're feeling. The second thing is A, which means to allow it. You know, this is the hard part. It's like I said, we really want to try to run away from anxiety or anything uncomfortable, but allowing your feelings helps them resolve, helps them. It's a good way to manage them, and not to judge it, not to, you know, ignore it, not to try to fix it. Just say, yeah, here you are. I see you. You know, I feel you. I know you're here. I recognize it. I allow it. And then to investigate it. If, you know, where am I feeling this in my body? Does it have a size, a shape, a color, a texture, a weight? Is it on the inside or the outside? Could I draw it? You can have your kids do this too. They love to draw things like this. And never underestimate how much anxiety is in, you know, a little 8-year-old body. It can be the Empire State Building, okay? So investigate it and really describe it. And then the last thing you want to do is really bring some compassion and love and nurturing to it, to replace it, to allow it to move through. What's on the other side of a rainstorm can be a rainbow, right? So, you know, what nurturing imagery, what nurturing feelings, what nurturing sensations do you want to replace your anxiety with? You know, it can be as simple as asking the kids what they want to do with their anxiety. A lot of kids want to throw it away, put it in a dump truck, blow it up, whatever. Let them do whatever they want with it. And you can say, what do you want to replace that with? Oh, I want a rainbow, or I want a swing set. You know, I want the sunrise. I mean, they come up with really beautiful imagery to replace their anxiety with, you know, a unicorn, maybe, I don't know, you know, something very nurturing to them and to you. You know, this imagery works well with you too. You know, I use it quite a bit sometimes when, you know, just even in the middle of the night, if you're waking up and you have, you know, looping thoughts, worry thoughts, you can use meditations and little interventions like this in the moment to kind of, you know, contain all that and put it away and imagine going back to sleep in a nice, safe environment, or, you know, cozy place. So yeah, I mean, those are just a few quick interventions. There's much more. You know, the biggest challenge is to remember to do these things. And, you know, even as a mental health therapist, I can tell you, I forget. You know, I forget that I have all these tools, and they're very good. They do work. And So if anybody has any questions, Amy, Emily, did I leave anything out? Does that seem pretty complete?
No, it was good.
All
Yeah,
right.
and it works. I will tell people it works for sure.
It does. I mean, you're pretty shocked sometimes
Yeah.
when it does. It's like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
I recently
questions?
found, I was just
sorry.
going to add, I've recently found online some video, like YouTube videos to share with clients that it's a calming picture and it's a guided meditation or something like that. Or it just focuses on breathing and you get to see the little scale go up and down. You know, you
Yeah.
follow breath and things like that. Just things to settle your mind and your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, I don't even think they had all this stuff on YouTube and, you know.
Right.
And
No.
definitely not in the 25 plus years I've been in mental health. There's so many good
Yep.
apps and YouTube videos, and there's good stuff out there.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Yeah. Any questions out there from anyone? So this is, I will just share, this is our contact information. And if anyone wants a copy of the PowerPoint, I'm happy to share it. I can, if you put your email in the chat box down at the bottom, I'm again happy to email it to you if the information would be helpful to have. I can certainly do that to you or send that to you. And I would just say that, you know, as school starts and if anything comes up, if you have any questions, anything at all, please don't hesitate to give us a call, to ask any one of us here at Catholic Charities. You know, I think that with all of this, there's a lot of uncertainty on what it's going to look like for all of our kids and the challenges. And I think, you know, it's going to be imperfect. And we're, as parents, going to do it imperfectly. And so if we can, you know, be of help to any of you, don't hesitate to get a hold of us. We're happy to be there at any time. So unless there's any final questions or comments, again, you can put your information in the chat box. If I'll keep it open a little bit. Otherwise, appreciate you all join us, and we'll be thinking of all of you as school starts. So
yeah.
thanks, Emily and Darla.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a safe school start.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. I think I see one chat in there. That must have been what you wrote, Amy, I think.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop recording here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's real life.
I know.